and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Today I'll be giving my Week 14 college football predictions for Friday's games. So starting with the Georgia versus Georgia Tech. So if you watch my last video, you already know that I'm picking Georgia to win this game. Georgia's defense against the run is about as good as it was in those two national championship teams, but they're not near as good at pressuring quarterbacks or in the secondary as those defenses were. But Georgia Tech, they are a really good running team. They're averaging 215.2 rushing yards per game, which ranks at 17th in the country. It's really because of Haynes King why they're so good at running. Haynes King is as good of a running quarterback as you're going to find. He's got 883 yards rushing and 15 rushing touchdowns and is averaging 5.3 yards per run. He's an even better runner than Gunnar Stockton is. And Georgia Tech's offensive line has been great this season. They've only allowed 8 sacks, and the team's averaging 5.7 yards a run. I think they can protect Haynes King in this game, and I think King will have some success running the football. But I do think that Georgia will stop the Georgia Tech running backs. And it seems like to beat Georgia, you have to have a great defense and be a great passing team. And Georgia Tech's defense has been far from great, especially recently. On average, they're giving up 241.6 passing yards per game, which is bad, and also 167.8 rushing yards per game, which is bad. And Gunnar Stockton is a better passer than Haynes King is. Now, Haynes King has been a great college quarterback, but he's not a great thrower of the football, and I don't think he's going to play in the NFL. Well, I do think Gunnar Stockton will. Now, Georgia Tech, they don't have a Zachariah Branch, but they do have some wide receivers that are good enough to possibly challenge what's not been a great Georgia secondary. But what's going to be the biggest advantage for Georgia in this game is their offensive line against Georgia Tech's defensive line. Georgia, I think, is going to push around this Georgia Tech defensive line and run for over 200 yards. I think Stockton will throw for close to 300 yards. I think Georgia Tech will play well in the first half of this game and maybe even have the lead at halftime. But I think Georgia in the second half will wear them down with the run game and pull away in the fourth quarter. I've got Georgia getting the win over Georgia Tech by a score of 55-20. So now Texas A&M at Texas. So you probably think that the reason why Texas has been a disappointment is Arch Manning and the offensive line, and you're not wrong. I've criticized both of them a lot this season, but as bad as they have been, they're not the whole reason for it. Texas's defense hasn't even been good overall. They had two really good games against Ohio State and Oklahoma, but then other than that, their defense has been average to bad. They've given up 30 plus points 4 times and gave up 27 points to a Florida offense that doesn't even exist. And as good as this Texas A&M offense is, I see another bad game coming for this Texas defense. Texas A&M has a big quarterback advantage because not only is Marcel Reed a much better passer than Arch Manning, he's also a much better runner too. And Texas A&M's at top two wide receivers, KC Concepcion and Mario Craver. I think they are the best combination in the SEC. I know Alabama's Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard would be close to them, but Craver and Concepcion have combined for 99 catches for 1,610 yards and 13 touchdowns. I think they're going to be a big mismatch for what's been a bad Texas secondary.
Craver, the motion man on 2nd down and 6. Fake it to Moss on the run. It's Craver out of the backfield. He's got a lot of speed down the sideline. Craver still going. Oh, Mario magic touchdown.
So with Texas A&M also having a better secondary than Texas, they're going to have a huge advantage throwing the football. I think Marcel Reed will throw for close to 300 yards in this game. And well, I do think Texas can slow down Texas A&M's run game at some because Texas does have a really good front seven. I think because Texas A&M has a much better offensive line than Texas does, Texas A&M is going to have a huge advantage at running the football still. Because even though Texas A&M doesn't really have better running backs than Texas, if one team has a bad offensive line and the other has a great offensive line, the running backs on the great offensive line are going to appear a lot better than the ones on the bad offensive line. And Texas A&M's Cassius Howell, I think, is just as good as Texas's best pass rusher, Colin Simmons. I think Cassius Howell is also going to be a first round draft pick. And with this being a rivalry game, I do think it will be competitive. And with this game being a home game for Texas, that will help them some. But I still think Texas A&M is way too good, and I think they pull away in the fourth quarter. I've got Texas A&M getting the win over Texas by a score of 38-24. So now Ole Miss at Mississippi State. Those cowbells are not going to be enough to save Mississippi State. Ole Miss is going to win this game by 2 scores for the third year in a row, and Mississippi State's going to miss a bowl game for the third year in a row, while Ole Miss gets their third 10-plus win season in a row. And if Lane Kiffin stays, I don't even know if this will be able to be considered a rivalry anymore because Ole Miss has turned into one of the elite programs of college football, while Mississippi State is turning into a group of five team. This is the first ever time that Ole Miss will have 10 wins going into the Egg Bowl. And Mississippi State's only conference win comes against the Woo Pig Suey Dummies, who are the only team in the SEC that are worse than they are. Mississippi State is so bad that they lost to Florida, and Florida fired Napier after beating Mississippi State. This really shows how bad Mississippi State is because he got fired for only beating them by 2 points. And you know Mississippi State is a bad football program when Dan Mullen is the best head coach they've ever had. Dan Mullen has never even been a top 25 head coach. He's at UNLV right now, and he can't even win the Mountain West Conference. Ole Miss always dominates Mississippi State in the transfer portal, and this year they're dominating them in recruiting too. Ole Miss currently has the top 20 recruiting class, while Mississippi State doesn't even have a top 50 recruiting class. Now, that will depend on if Lane Kiffin decides to stay or go. But Mississippi State's defense is terrible. They've given up 30 plus points 5 times this season. It's because they're so bad against the run. They're giving up on average 189.8 rushing yards per game. And what would even more let you know how bad they are against the run is that Missouri put up nearly 50 points on them with no quarterback. They just ran all over them. Kaiwan Lacey is easily going to have another 100-yard rushing game, probably a lot more than that. And I think Chambliss will run for 50 plus yards in this one. Now, Mississippi State does have some decent running backs, but they don't have a running back near as good as Kaiwan Lacey. Ole Miss will run for 200 plus yards in this game, I'd say easily. And Mississippi State, I hate to say it because I'm an Ole Miss fan, but their secondary has been okay. They're giving up on average at 203.4 yards passing per game, but their secondary is not near as good as the Ole Miss's is, and it's going to be no match for this wide receiver and tight end rooms at Ole Miss. Now Mississippi State, they do have a couple of good wide receivers, but they've not got near the depth at wide receiver that Ole Miss has. And Mississippi State quarterback Blake Shapen is decent. In 11 games, he's thrown for 2,433 yards and completed at 64.4% of his passes, which is good, and averages 8.8 yards a throw, which is good. But Trinidad Chambliss is a way better quarterback. He didn't even become the starter, until the third game, and he's got 2,657 yards passing and is completing 65.2% of his passes and averages 8.9 yards per throw. And his touchdown interception ratio was a lot better than Shapen's is. His is 14-3, while Shapen's is 15-8. Trinidad Chambliss, I think, will throw for close to 300 yards in this game. And Chambliss isn't just a much better thrower than Shapen is. He's also a much better runner too. Chambliss has run for 444 and 6 touchdowns, averaging 4 yards per carry, while Shapen is just a complete statue with only 28 rushing yards all season and averages zero point 0.3 yards per run. And Mississippi State will be at a big disadvantage at the line of scrimmage against Ole Miss. The Ole Miss offensive line, especially, is a lot better than the Mississippi State offensive line. Mississippi State's offensive line is terrible, one of the worst in the SEC. They've given up 37 sacks and only averaged 3.6 yards per run. And while I may not be able to say this after the game, but at least for the game, Ole Miss has a much better head coach than Mississippi State does. Jeff Levy, he's a good offensive coordinator, but I don't think he knows what he's doing as a head coach. He got that one fluke win against Arizona State that would probably beat Mississippi State 9 times out of 10. But other than that, he's not really done anything at Mississippi State. I do think this game will be competitive because it is a rivalry, but Ole Miss, I think, will pull away in the fourth quarter. I've got Ole Miss getting the win at 31-21 over Mississippi State. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.